A recent poll of Conservative members found that Rishi Sunak was by far and away the most popular candidate to be the next leader. But what is his appeal? Where does it come from? Here are the 5 Ps of Rishi Sunak's popularity. The pandemic really is the platform that made Rishi Sunak a household name. Up until that point, he'd been relatively unknown. He was a junior Treasury Minister, he'd only been an MP since 2015, and then all of a sudden he was parachuted into the second most important job in government when Sajid Javid resigned rather than accept that he would have to sack his advisors. But it was only when he became Chancellor just a couple of weeks before the first lockdown that he really became a force to be reckoned with. And it was evident early on that he was a competent minister. He seemed on top of his brief even in those early days, despite the fact that he was having to grapple with an unknown quantity in the form of the pandemic. After that baptism of fire, there was another mini-budget and then another budget. And between that, he had plenty of other initiatives like the Kickstarter scheme and the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, all of which have helped contribute to making him a real standout figure in the government.
And with this measure, we can all eat out to help out.
Normally chancellors are the sort of people that might hover in the background, but he really took front and centre because what he was doing was having a direct impact on everyone's lives. Boris Johnson's charm has been built up around his lovable but clownish presence. Rishi Sunak's taken a very different approach, and one which is the perfect foil to the Prime Minister. He is always on message. He never strays from the message that he's trying to deliver, which means that there are no gaffes that his aides have to mop up.
We can deliver these things and actually make sure that the support gets to people.
And with that also, he always looks the part. His hair is always in place. He looks good in a hoodie. That has all kind of helped to sort of build up something of a fandom around this idea of Dishy Rishi. With that also, his social media game is very strong. He's been pushing out things under the brand Rishi Sunak rather than under the Conservatives or number 10 or number 11 or the Treasury. So that means that people know his name rather than his job. And that means he's got almost as much brand recognition as Boris Johnson himself. But critically, he also knows the key to not always hogging the limelight. He knows when to shut up and go away for a little bit. One of the most powerful components of Rishi Sunak's popularity amongst core Tory voters is his political philosophy and his commitment to free market economics. Without that, I think he would have lost a lot of support, particularly throughout the pandemic when it's looked at times as though there'll be no end to the spending. It's very easy to win shallow appeal when you're splashing the cash. But as a Conservative minister, what voters really want to see is that you know when to turn the taps off. The Chancellor has consistently reiterated the need to rebalance the books. Whereas Boris Johnson perhaps might be a bit more free and easy with his spending, and people might be a little less convinced about his commitment to traditional Conservative principles about tax and spend. There's no doubt that Rishi Sunak really is a Conservative in that regard, and that's what keeps the voters on side. To a certain extent, one of the reasons that Rishi Sunak has been so successful is luck. He hasn't really been up against a particularly powerful opponent. Labour have tried, but really failed to cut his legs from underneath him. Annalise Dodds and her successor, Rachel Reeves, are both competent and intelligent women, but neither of them really have the oomph required to inflict the sort of damage that is needed for someone that's quite so charismatic as Rishi Sunak.
Promise to manage our economies responsibly. We're getting it done.
In recent years, the Conservative Party has faced a bit of a struggle in terms of working out where its next leader might be. Arguably, this is one of the reasons why Theresa May lasted as long as she did in the job. At one point, people were scouting around for any replacement, and the best hope they could come up with was Ruth Davidson, who wasn't even an MP. A recent poll among Conservative members found that Rishi Sunak was by far and away the most popular candidate to be the next leader, and that necessarily gives him something of a snowball effect. The more plausible he seems, the more people will rally around him, both voters and MPs. Boris Johnson always used to say there was more chance of him turning into an olive than becoming Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak hasn't put it in quite such stark terms, instead preferring to say that he's focusing on the job at hand. And while that is a big job, undeniably, it won't be his last.
The story of this government has been the story of a national jobs miracle.